we will get started. Welcome everyone to this edition, and good afternoon for this wonderful spring afternoon, to this edition of AARP Massachusetts Fraud Talk Tuesday. We are here the second Tuesday of each month from 12 to 12:30, where we discuss a different scam and how to protect you and your family. My name is Dennis Hohengasser, a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts, and our guest today is Teresa Chakwas, also a volunteer with the AARP Massachusetts Speakers Bureau. Today's topic is caregiving fraud. You may have joined us today with questions already in mind, and if you have, please put them into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we'll discuss those at the end. If questions come up during the presentation, again, put them down in the Q&A. This session is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of the recording that you can share with your family and your friends. At the end of the presentation, we're going to share a page with links to a number of resources. So let's get started. Teresa, I know that you have a special interest in caregiving. Can you talk about some of the things you learned through your experience?
Sure. Hi, Dennis. Yeah, through my experience, when I, had cancer, had to have 5 months of aggressive chemotherapy, I really needed to have a plan in place. And I found that, having a plan in place with the ability to make changes as our lives and abilities change is very important. Ongoing communication with family and friends is also important. And we shouldn't be afraid to have conversations with our trusted group. And the sooner we start the conversation, the better, since then we're able to fully participate and be heard regarding what we need to have happen.
So at this point, relying on, you relied heavily on family and friends, as I recall. If that's not enough, you may need to look for professional services. What steps can you take to find reputable and reliable providers?
So Paul Greenwood, a former deputy district attorney in San Diego who prosecuted hundreds of elder fraud cases, says hire caregivers only through a bonded and insured home care agency. He also states, don't use an online classified site like Craigslist or put an ad in the paper. And Greenwood also indicates going through a bonded agency is more expensive, but at least you're buying some form of protection so that if the worst happens, you probably have a far better chance to get reimbursed. So when you approach an agency, be prepared with questions about who they are and how they operate. Jelaine Gunther is an expert on banking and fraud with AARP's Public Policy Institute and is National Director of AARP's Bank Safe Initiative. So this particular issue is personal for her, as she and her family learned that her grandfather was losing money frequently. Coming from a family of bankers, they had access to that exploding die packs that banks used to mark money taken in robberies. So they placed in the grandfather's wallet in a filing cabinet with one of these die packs. And in less than 24 hours, a paid caregiver who was very close to her grandparents was caught red-handed, literally. So Gunther recommends asking when seeking a caregiver, how long has the agency been in business? Is it financially sound? What experience and certifications are employees required to have? Does it do criminal background checks on its caregivers? And does it conduct drug screening?
So working with a reputable bonded agency is part of the path to peace of mind. In bringing in a caregiver into the loved one's home. What other things can you do?
So there's 5 things to consider. First, secure valuables, cash, and cards. Create an inventory of all the valuables in the house, including a photo or video record of items and a list of where they're stored. Keep smaller items like jewelry locked up at all times. Limit an in-home aide's access to the recipient's cash, checkbooks, and credit cards. And if their job includes buying groceries or running errands, for the care recipient, consider giving them prepaid debit cards for those purposes so they can spend only the loaded amount. Second, be present. Check in regularly with both the caregiver and the care recipient to monitor the quality of service and see how the relationship is going. Greenwood says, make unannounced visits if you're close by. If you live far away, ask a trusted friend or of your loved one to pop in at least once or twice a month. Third, use technology. Greenwood advises, if your loved one will allow it, install a doorbell video camera on the front door so you know exactly when the caregiver comes and goes. Video cameras in common areas like the kitchen or living room can provide additional monitoring and theft protection, but make sure to follow your state's laws on the use of security cameras to supervise people working in the home. Fourth, monitor transactions. Gunther says, contact your loved one's bank or credit union to arrange a view-only access to their accounts, or sign them up for a monitoring service such as EverSafe. These options allow you to view but not transact on the account, much like an accountant on a business account. Greenwood advises families to write a letter to a parent or older relative's bank after hiring a new caregiver, asking it to keep a special eye on the loved one's accounts and notify Adult Protective Services if they spot unusual activity. He says, don't do this by phone or email. Letters get results far better than an email or a phone call. And fifth, watch for warning signs. Unusual financial activity can be a tip-off that an older loved one is being exploited by a caregiver or other person who's gained access to their money. So here are some of the red flags to look out for, according to the American Bankers Association. Large, frequent, or unexplained bank withdrawals of fund transfers, changing from a basic bank account to one with more complicated services. A new person conducting financial transactions on a loved one's behalf without proper documentation, such as a financial power of attorney. Checks that are written as loans or gifts have suspicious looking signatures. Sudden overdrafts or unpaid bills, and changes to wills, trusts, or powers of attorney.
As you mentioned in the beginning, setting up a caregiving plan can be daunting. Does AARP have any online or printed resources to help someone navigate this process?
Yes. I think on the screen you're going to show in a couple minutes a list of resources, but you should contact the police and your local Adult Protective Services agency. The U.S. Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative offers an elder fraud hotline, and that number is 833-372-8311. They also offer an online map of state agencies that assist in cases of elder abuse. Advise the older person's attorney of any suspected financial abuse, especially if a caregiver is exerting pressure to revise their estate planning documents. If you suspect fraud or to receive support if you have been victimized by this or any type of fraud, the AARP Fraud Watch hotline is always available at the number you see at the top of the list here, 877-908-3360. So Dennis, I think you're going to go through the rest of the items here in the resources page.
Yep. First of all, the Fraud Watch Center is part of the Fraud Watch Network, has a section. They have about 70 different types of scams, and one of them specifically deals with caregiving scams. So you might want to take a look at that. You're going to get this recording and you're going to get this slide sent to you. And all these blue words here are linked, so you can simply click on the link and it'll take you right to that part. There's also family caregiving resources. They talk about aging in place, preventing someone with dementia from wandering off, navigating difficult, and as Teresa said, navigating difficult family caregiving conversations. There's things like 5 tips for first-time family caregivers, and as Teresa mentioned, using technology that can make caregiving easier. Other things that are down there, that download a caregiving guide. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to a page where you can download a caregiving guide in either English, Spanish, Chinese, Asian American, something specific to the military and something specific to the LGBT community. You can always click on the link for the Fraud Watch Network, which will bring up tons of information relative to protecting you and your family. And as Teresa mentioned, clicking on aarp.org/fraud support, you can register for something called virtual sessions. And there's a skilled leader at the group. And oftentimes the groups are only a couple people, and you can share your experience. It's a wonderful way of helping yourself deal with the emotional trauma that occurs when you've been victimized by a scam. And that doesn't have to be simply caregiving scams, but any type of scam. So you'll be getting this, and let me stop sharing screen and send it back to Teresa and us.
Do we have any questions? Or?
Yeah, what should you do if you suspect caregiving fraud or theft in particular? Anything that or we can go back to discussing some of the things that you learned in terms of reaching out to get caregiving. It's a very emotional time, and when our emotions are running high, whether it's fear of what we're going to do or elation that we think we found a great caregiver, sometimes those emotions, and what they call getting under the ether, getting in a heightened emotional state, sometimes clouds our judgment. So it's really important, I think, that when you're dealing with something as emotional as caregiving, it's important to be aware of your emotions. So Teresa, any other thoughts about when you were going through caregiving?
Well, yeah, I mean, first, of course, in my situation, when you get sort of that devastating diagnosis, sometimes just taking a minute to even get yourself together. But then I had someone, I was still working at the time, and the Americans with Disabilities Act person at our offices talked to me about his experience with his mother and all of the care that she did need. And he, suggested, like, really, this is the time to reach out and ask people for help. And so once I was sort of calm and I knew, okay, I need to make a plan, that just being calm and in that ability to do that, to be able to have control over my plan, for me was key, because it's always tough to admit that you're going to need help. But if you take that in its context and then seek out that help while you're able to set it up, who's going to do what, who's going to be coming in your house, who's going to be providing care or transportation for you. That to me was a great comfort. And I was lucky enough that I had great friends and neighbors, so they were already people I could trust, and that my daughters knew, they could trust to help take care of me. So that was key. And then just keeping that conversation going, letting people know when you have a good day, when you have a bad day, things like that is I can't emphasize enough how important that is. If you keep waiting and putting it off, all of a sudden now you're in a position where it's an urgency, you have to get it done, you're upset, maybe the person who needs the care has, their condition has debilitated to a certain extent, and now they can no longer participate. And then you're playing that guessing game of what does mom want? What did dad say? What should I do? And that only adds to, that heightened emotional state where some of these scammers can just zoom right in on that and really take advantage.
I think in the past, I've heard you talk about some difficult conversations that are involved with deciding on how to go through caregiving. I have a relative who's maybe dealing with this in the real near future and not quite sure what to do. And some of the resources I provided to her through the AARP website, she found very, very beneficial. But having those difficult conversations really need to start early.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's tough to talk about, it seems kind of, it's very daunting, but really to just have them in a casual way, you're sitting down, having a cup of tea or a glass of wine or something together, that it's kind of in those moments, just kind of starting. And even if you talk just a little bit, about one topic, and save the rest for later, you'll find that the next time it's a lot easier. And sometimes it helps to have either, another family member or a friend or somebody close, or even a clergy person around to kind of help, ease that conversation a bit, so that your loved one doesn't feel like, you're ganging up on them, or you're just, you're not listening. And so having sort of a third person, if it's possible, can kind of ease that tension a little bit and take the burden off of you, or the one who's the main person, who needs to know the information. And then I think once the care recipient sees that they're being listened to, they're being heard, their concerns are being considered, I think it makes it a lot easier for them to sort of continue and say, okay, yeah, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, or, then it gives them control. And I think for all of us who are aging, that's kind of one of our biggest fears, that sort of loss of control of what's happening in our life, or where we live, or how we live, and all of that. And we want to be able to continue to do that as long as we can. So this, having this conversation is the perfect opportunity to do that, to take control, be in control, have the knowledge of what your plan is and what it's going to be, and even interviewing possible caregivers sooner rather than later, so at least you can get to know, if not the individual person, but the agency itself, if you go that route, so that it's an agency that is trustworthy, et cetera, and you have time to do your research and get references and things like that.
I think it's a great idea to have another person involved in the conversation, somebody who might be a little more detached from the situation, who can add some perspective. If you're interviewing say a caregiving agency, you may be not hearing everything they're saying, and this sort of detached person can help you put things in perspective, I think. Exactly.
That's why, having that third person is just, it's not like, concerned family member versus care recipient. It's more like a team approach, that everybody's participating in the approach. So I think that makes a huge difference.
And we haven't got any questions yet, but if you have anything you want to share with the group too, you can put it into Q&A. We have Teresa, and Teresa has gone through this already, so she has a real deep perspective of how this can affect not only the individual who needs caregiving, but the entire family. So if you have anything to put in the Q&A, please put that in, and we'll bring it up and discuss it.
And Dennis, people don't always have to be in the same place at the same time. Now everybody's kind of familiar with using Zoom and things like that. So, I have a very close friend. Her mom had to be put in care now about 2 years ago now. She lives in Virginia where they brought her mom to. She has a sister in Ohio and her brother is in California. And so what they do is they meet over Zoom periodically, but the brother takes care of all the paperwork, kind of all the business and the health insurance, all of that. The sister in Ohio will come and relieve, my friend in Virginia. She goes about every month or every 6 weeks and spends, 4 or 5 days. And that way she goes to the nursing home. If mom has appointments, she visits with her, she takes her out. So that gives my friend Vanessa a break from having to do all of that, most of the time. And so this way they all stay in communication with one another. They all, see their mom and get to visit with her, but everything, but they meet regularly on Zoom because, they're so far apart. So it's possible with technology to still, kind of have that family meeting and everybody have a role to play and everybody, can pick the thing they want to do that they're most comfortable with. So it seems impossible sometimes, but when you sit down and start talking about it, it really isn't.
Yeah, when you parse it in different tasks that have to be accomplished, everybody has their strength. My sister worked in a nursing home, and she had an unbelievable perspective of a whole bunch of healthcare issues that our other family members didn't, and we relied on her pretty heavily. So if you have a family member who has some background in this, say even not even in caregiving, but say in financial matters, they can deal with that part of the situation. Someone that's great at interviewing can interview, work with interviewing caregiving agencies or staff. And there's some family members that are great at problem solving, and they can step in and having that somebody who's a little bit distanced from it doesn't get that emotionally involved and can think out of the box sometimes for solutions to problems that if you're really heavily emotionally involved with the situation, sometimes you don't see.
Right. Exactly.
So we don't have any questions yet or comments. But I do want to, you will be getting the slide that has all those links to the caregiving resources that AARP supplies. And in terms of scams, another great resource, if you were having a problem, is to call Elder Affairs at the Attorney General's office. They're exceptional at researching these situations. I did a presentation in Mattapan a couple days ago, and we were talking about resources. And there were several people who had experience with the Attorney General's office, and they were very pleased with the reception they got and with the follow-up that was taken to resolve their problem. So Attorney General's offices are always a great resource to start if you're having a problem and you think something might be a scam.
Yep.
And it's important that if you think it's a scam, even if it's, say, home health care, and somebody's been approved for home health care for say a number of visits. I've heard stories where people, after 3 or 4 visits, they said, I don't want this person anymore. They're not doing anything for me. And that's where it stops. It's important that you refer this either to back to the agency that hired them, or to if it's a Medicare, to Medicare, because you don't want inferior service being provided. Oftentimes people think, well, I'm the only one that's experiencing that. In fact, it's probably not true. A lot of people may be experiencing this. Same thing with home health care visits, in supporting our family members. If you're approved for, say, a dozen, keep track of how many times they're actually coming, that you're not billed for more than they actually arrived at and provided services.
Indeed, yep. That's
So
true.
we don't, you must have done a superior job here, Teresa, because we have no questions.
I don't know, you know, and I'm glad you mentioned that about just calling sometimes, even if you know, this elder fraud hotline or whomever, because sometimes they may already have kind of a little red flag on some agency or group. And then when they start getting these calls and they see this pattern, that helps them to be able to kind of go to the next step. So don't think sometimes that when you call, if it doesn't seem like, oh, you know, they're going to come running out there, that they're not taking note of what you're telling them, and then being able to move forward in a way that, you know, we may or may not see, but I think the information does get documented, and then they can move forward with it at a later time.
Yes, I do. Well, Teresa, thank you for sharing your insight and your experience. Next month, our Fraud Talk Tuesday will be an update on scams targeting veterans and their families. Seeing we're getting close to Memorial Day, we thought it was appropriate to do it now. So if you are a veteran or you know a veteran, this topic will provide some valuable information. So please join us on May 9th at noon for scams targeting veterans. And on that note, Teresa, I thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Take care, everyone.